Okay, so I'm going to call our meeting to order. Just remind everybody that, yeah, go ahead and have a seat, guys. Remind everybody to inform the public that we're being videotaped. And certainly if you have any questions, you'll get a chance to ask questions in the public question period. We have O Canada from Oakbank Elementary, so can we please all stand? Thank you to Oakbank Elementary. I was worried there, Stacy, that I was going to have to start singing, and that would have been a problem. So great, thanks to them. We have a treaty acknowledgement. I'd like to ask Trustee Pachuski to read out our treaty acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We acknowledge the traditional land upon which Sunrise School Division resides as Treaty 1 territory. We honor our partnership with Canada's original peoples and respect the gifts of Indigenous history, culture, and language. We commit to moving forward in partnership with our communities in a spirit of collaboration and reconciliation.
Thank you. So I need an adoption of our agenda. And a reminder to everybody is that you do need to submit agenda items to the 5 members of the Agenda Setting Committee. So can I have a mover and a seconder for our agenda? Moved by Trustee Pachuski, seconded by Trustee Nickel. We'll vote, please. Oh, before we vote? Okay. On the agenda? Okay.
Sorry, just hold on here. I have to look at the agenda and see it. The item number, you know what, I can't pull it up in front of me for some reason here, but the item number with respect to speaking about the personnel item of the SEO, I'm just wondering if that should have been an in-camera and if we should move that to an in-camera discussion.
Where's that? Go ahead, Kath.
So I think we talked at the Agenda Setting Committee that it is a posting and the job description, and that needs to come here as a board so that we can look at that and have that discussion. Because it doesn't involve anybody's position, that it didn't need to be in camera, but I can certainly defer to the wisdom of the room.
As long as it has no personal information, or then I guess I have no issues with it.
Yeah, I think that it's not a finished document. I think the board needs to discuss the document in camera, then bring it out to regular for approval, but it needs to be discussed in camera. It is a personal item in terms of the content of the items that are in there.
So then I'm hearing that we would like to add this item to in camera. Is that what you're saying? Anyone else? Are we good with that then? Okay, so we'll get to it. So 8.3 is the SEO hiring. That's the SEO. No, SEO stands for Senior Electoral Officer. Thanks. Okay, we'll go ahead and do that. Any other questions on the agenda? Okay, hearing none. Stacy, is what you showed me, is it on there? Okay, perfect. So hearing none, we'll vote. Okay, so it's passed with unanimous here. As you know, we have two trustees that are not here. So chair's comments, I think that I'll hold off on comments, but I would like us to moving to share a story. Anybody around the table would like to share a story? Floor is yours. Anyone? Trustee Paczewski?
A number of trustees, including myself, so I'll just speak for myself, we were able to tour a couple locations throughout the division within the last couple weeks, and that was very informative and nice to see some of the things firsthand, what's going on in the division at our different locations. And I just wanted to thank the folks, our senior admin team mostly, for setting that up for us, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jared. Kath?
We have Yes I Can Awards coming up the third week of February. We'll be here doing some public board presentation, but it's kind of nice to have Springfield Collegiate here because we have Charlie Guimond, Riley Nash, and Tony Tavares Jacobek who are getting awards at the Yes I Can Awards from Springfield Collegiate.
Anyone else? Okay. We have our group here from Springfield Collegiate, but before we introduce yourself, you introduce us, we'll introduce ourselves to you. So how about, Robin, I'll start with you. Can we go around the table and can we introduce ourselves to Kevin and Carol? Just who you are in the area that you represent.
Robin Harris, trustee for Ward 2, the Enola area.
Barry Pachkowski, Ward 6, and welcome, and looking forward to hearing from you guys.
Stacy Bonto, I'm Scott's assistant.
Don Nickel from Whitemouth Meadows, Ward 1, of course. Art Berry, trustee, Ward 5, Beaudesert.
And I'm Paul, trustee from Powerview.
Karen Inslee, Ward 4, but you know that.
Hi, welcome.
So welcome. She does a lot of the work with our schools on their school plan process and their data collection, and does all of our school visits and our meetings. Sort of worked and helped. I think we've all kind of worked some really good discussions with the floor is yours to share your presentation with the board, and they will have some questions for you after.
Good evening. And first thing I want to say is thank you for giving us this time to share a bit of our story tonight. We appreciate it. We know how busy you are. I don't know everybody around in the room as well as I'd like, but I thought I'd give you a quick history. I've worked for Sunrise for just over 20 years. Moved into Oakbank with my wife about 20 years ago. And I've had the pleasure of working at Oakbank Elementary, Springfield Middle School, and now Springfield Collegiate. My son was lucky enough to be with me at all three schools. I've also worked for 17 years as music program leader for Sunrise School Division. I feel really fortunate that my boys came through the system. And I want to thank Kathy and Jackie and Leanne for their support as senior team members. And I'd like to thank Sunrise School Division for all of the career opportunities that I've had over the last 20 years.
So similar to Kevin, I've been with Sunrise for 20 years, but I was actually a graduate of Springfield Collegiate, the year to remain unknown. I worked as a teacher for 14 years in Sunrise and as an administrator for the last 6. I have 2 boys. Owen graduated 2 years ago from Springfield Collegiate, and my youngest is to graduate this June. I'd also like to thank you for the opportunity to grow as a leader. I know when I reflect back on my years in Sunrise, I've had great administrators to model leadership, and I've also been blessed with great administrative partners to kind of grow my craft. So thank you for that.
Is Kathy one of your administrators? Yeah, good move. We want to share with you tonight in the little time that we have, talk about our school goal. And our school goal is there, and it's pretty straightforward. By the end of each semester, all students will have a 5% increase in one outcome. The most important aspect of a school goal, of course, is to improve student learning. It's that simple. Carol and I are relatively new administrators to that school, and we really wanted to bring a meat and potatoes goal to the school that every teacher could buy into. High school is just a little bit different than early years. Early years, as you know, has a homeroom teacher, and that homeroom teacher might teach the student language arts, math, social studies, science. They might leave for phys ed, but mostly they're teaching their students almost all day. So if they want to do a straight-out literacy or numeracy goal, it kind of works because they see that student and can run that goal throughout the day. High school is a little bit different because we're going from biology to chemistry to power mech to art to social studies. It's pretty specified. So we wanted a goal that every teacher could buy into. So to Carol and I, it made sense that we would ask a teacher to identify one outcome or one area of instruction, pick it, and try to get a 5% increase in that area. We, of course, kept provincial and divisional direction in mind. We also kept the Sunrise IBM report of responsive teaching, triangulation, and student profiles in mind. And I do want to state we always have an underlying goal of improve literacy and numeracy. We also had a chance to build an SCI PD plan, which is directly related to this school goal. And we also built the goal with data collection in mind because we know that we need to demonstrate to you that the money you're putting into schools is improving student education. So data collection around this is really important. So how do we go about improving student learning? Staff respond to student need through responsive teaching practice, focus on outcomes, and data-driven decisions. What is responsive teaching? Pretty straightforward. The teacher needs to identify student learning gaps or areas that students struggle in, and then they need to adjust their teaching to improve learning. Where do students struggle? Is it the students? Possibly, but more likely the teacher. So the teacher needs to adjust his or her teaching to meet the student need. It's a bit of a mindset shift from the students just don't get it to why don't they get it, and then how do I improve my teaching? So responsive teaching allows for teachers to be reflective of their practice and to work on improvement. In order to do this, we need a school culture where staff feel comfortable admitting that they need to improve. They also need to be comfortable that they can be vulnerable with each other and admit they need to improve something. And that means that teachers have to trust each other and need to trust Carol and I. Identifying a specific piece of what needs to be improved in student learning can be a pretty big struggle. It's easy to say that a student doesn't understand division in math, but it's more difficult to pinpoint what they don't get about it and then how to teach it better. So once this piece or outcome is identified, teachers can work alone, of course, or with others to improve student learning. And then, of course, data. We need to use the tools that we have. The division purchased some software years ago. Markbook is part of that software. And we can use that to determine exactly where the student learning gap is. And we'll talk about Markbook a little bit later.
So in our presentation, we've used some symbols to identify the slides. If you see a circle, that's when we've done some intentional professional development with staff to support our school goal. When you see a triangle, that's where we have spent some school-based decision-making dollars to support the teachers and thereby improve student learning in the classrooms. And the importance of those SBDM dollars can't be understated because that money reaches right into the hands of the students in the classrooms.
SBDM dollars, like Carol mentioned, that are allocated to schools are really, really important to us. And having worked in 3 schools in Sunrise now, I have seen in the early and middle and senior years how important these dollars are. They give us some autonomy around student learning, and they help us to put money directly where the student learning gaps might be. It's about flexibility. So back on November 29th, we had a PD day, and who knows best but teachers, where the rubber really does hit the road about what do they need in the classroom to improve student learning. So what did we do? We asked them, what tools do we need to put in your hands so that we can increase learning and one outcome by 5%?
So we use the money for manipulatives, which are hands-on items to enhance learning in the classroom. So the left-hand picture there on the slide are example of some of the games that we bought. Hands-on manipulatives, spinners, and dice for a math class. We also purchased some small whiteboards, and the ability for students to write an answer on a whiteboard, flip it up for a teacher to see, gives the teacher immediate feedback whether the 25 students in the class understand a concept just by lifting up their answer on the whiteboard. We bought some chemical atom model kits. Those allow students to physically build models of molecules in a chemistry class. We purchased some technology. We bought some document cameras. On the picture on the far right of the slide, that's an example of a teacher using a document camera in that she's using manipulatives, algebra tiles at the front, and the student can mimic what she's doing at the front on her desk on their desk. So it just allows for projection and so that every student can participate in the activity. One of the pieces that we were most impressed with was our teachers' willingness and ability to recognize where they wanted to do some professional development in terms of their skills in the classroom. So they wanted to buy some resource books. So we bought some books on transforming school culture. We bought training from the back of the room, facilitating teacher teams, and once again, Kevin and I were impressed with our teachers' buy-in and willingness to collaborate together to learn to be better. So when we look at our observations of success thus far, we started with our September 30th staff meeting. We grouped teachers together that taught in a similar subject area. We just asked them to have a conversation about which outcomes do your students struggle with year after year. And then once they identified that piece, then they had a conversation around, so why is it? And many, if not all of them, got to the point of, well, they really don't get this, but I think I can teach it a different way to show some improvement for those students. And then we moved forward to November 29th. That was our full PD day. Teachers recognized that it was one thing to have a conversation about, generally speaking, where students struggle, but it's another piece when you base it on the data. And so in order to base that decision on data, we needed to collect data appropriately. So on that 29th day, we spent a lot of time working in Markbook, and we'll share what we did a little bit later in the slide. One of the really interesting things on the 29th day was some of our English teachers decided on their own to collaborate together to plan some vertical alignment between their assessment practices. So that means that they started at the grade 9 outcomes and they decided what does this assessment look like in grade 9 and how can we build on it for grade 10 and how can we from 11 and from 12. And so I really think that speaks to the culture in the building that they went about it on their own and created something that they can all use. An example, just walking through a classroom, we had a learning support teacher that went into a LifeWorks class, and the learning support, by teaching a couple of classes, the regular classroom teacher had an opportunity to meet with students that were struggling with an outcome one-on-one, change something, and then the student had success in that class. So once again, we see success in many places that we look in our building. Science 10F, 2 teachers decided that, you know, when I'm teaching scientific literacy to kids, they're not really comprehending it. So we had an English teacher pair up with a science teacher, and they worked on some reading comprehension strategies to decode those scientific articles, and that was very powerful for both teachers involved.
So what's some evidence of progress? And talking about conversations, I wish Leanne was here because I chose this word carefully last year. Leanne nudged Carol and I into some very valuable PD. And we took some of that PD and, of course, have used it at our school. And on this slide, you're going to see a worksheet that we got from that PD. And I want to talk about this worksheet from Simon Breakspear and his learning teaching sprint work. So anyway, this process helps the teacher to identify the real area that the student may be struggling in. And again, identifying the specific issue can be very difficult. I want to compare this to the work a mechanic does. Your car's engine light is on. So you bring your car to a mechanic. He's got to figure out exactly what's causing that problem. It might be the hole in the muffler that he first sees. It might be the worn brakes. But after fixing those things, the engine light is still on. So he's got to dig deep into the car, and he's got to find that one specific thing that is causing that engine light to come on. Eventually he figures it out. Might be with the help of another mechanic, might be technology that he uses, or it might be other tools before he gets to the root of the problem. Then he ends up replacing the part. We can liken that to responsive teaching, and we'll take that same principle. Here we're talking about a boulder and a pebble and a grain of sand. So the teacher's going to look at their whole course. Then the teacher's going to look at part of that course, maybe a concept in that course, that's the pebble. And then they need to break it down into one very specific part of their teaching, and that's called the grain of sand. And believe it or not, that's difficult for teachers to do sometimes. They really have to know their curriculum. They really have to know what they're teaching. They really got to boil it down so they can improve student learning.
So when we went to school, we were given marks based on tests and assignments. Today, we try to pay specific attention to the outcomes that are included in that unit. So if we think about the mechanic, if the engine light's on, but is that the problem? The mechanic needs to find out exactly why the light is on. So teachers need to find out what outcome the student doesn't understand. Previous to our November 29th PD Day, this is an example of what teachers' mark books look like. Outcomes were organized within units, and assessments were listed as tests and assignments. That's not to say that the outcomes weren't being taught. They just weren't being categorized in mark book to provide specific data about where a student is struggling. So the outcomes would fall within the lab safety quiz, but if I'm a parent looking at a mark book online, I don't know exactly the outcomes that were involved in that lab safety quiz. So then after our November 29th day, we asked all staff to work on one course that they were familiar with, that they were teaching in the second semester. So the teachers set up their mark books so that ultimately it's still set up by unit, but underneath of the unit heading, the outcomes are all listed. Rather than tests and assignments, you'll see outcomes, and if you go to the Manitoba Education curriculum documents, you'll find the outcomes as they are listed on the students' mark books. This allows students, parents, and teachers to easily identify which outcome within a unit is the one that students struggle with the most. And a reminder that our mark books are viewable online, so parents can see exactly which outcome their child is struggling with. So it's one thing, I don't know if I can read those, it's one thing to not do so well on atoms and elements, but when you've done well on the first 3 outcomes but not the 4th, perhaps the student doesn't need to spend a ton of time on the first 3, but maybe if they just master that 4th outcome, that chapter is then more success for the student. So back to the mechanic, if I get a bill for $2,000 from my mechanic and I get the bill back and it says, we turned the engine light off, well, I'm probably not going to pay that bill. because I want a breakdown of exactly what the problem was and what they fixed. With a well-organized mark book, teachers, parents, and students can see exactly what areas need improvement. When students are aware of what they need to know, how well they know it, and where they need to focus their understanding, there's no trickery involved in students earning those marks and demonstrating their understanding of the outcomes.
This slide shows us some of the data that we can pull from Maplewood. So it's a pretty simple graph. You can see that there's some marks in the middle and towards the right that are low. So this is taken straight from a teacher's mark book, and it's, I know that you can't read it, but that's not really the point. The point is you can see where the student's mark dipped down, and that is clearly where the teacher probably needs to adjust his or her teaching so that the student can learn better.
Another piece that we were impressed with after the work on the 29th was the staff changed some of their course outline. So course outline is something that you would hand out at the beginning of the year that tells the student where they're going in terms of the course. And rather than just list the units, this teacher went ahead and listed the units, but also listed the outcomes that would be addressed in each unit and assigned a timeline for when that would fall in the course and how much time would be spent on it. So it's kind of adding a layer of transparency so the student is well aware of what they need to do, how long it's going to take, and how they can improve and what they need to do to improve.
I know that as a school board you have a really important job. You need to represent the taxpayer. And I know that you need to answer to them saying that, hey, what we're doing in Sunrise is working. So it's important for us that we collect some data that we can share with you to prove that what we're doing is working. So as a direct result of our school goal, we had a math teacher who came up with some data, and she has shown a 21 and 20% increases in student achievement due to our school goal process. Sometimes it's important. By helping students understand one small thing in math, it can lead to success in other areas of math. It's called responsive teaching, which we talked about. So what's the next step here? Well, we're going to apply it to another gap in student learning and then continue on that process. So we're looking at a 3-year plan because we've just kind of started this school goal. And I think improving student learning is something that probably could go on forever. But we do want to continue with responsive teaching that I've talked about. We do want to identify more areas where student learning needs to improve. We want to celebrate, of course, what's happening, what's going well. We want teachers to help each other, and that creates a bit of a culture change in our school. We want all of our mark books to be modified to be outcomes-based. We want students and parents to be aware of the improvements that are needed. We want to continue to collect data. And here's what's really important to Carol and I. We want this process to eventually become part of our SCI culture, that they're always looking to improve student learning. And that means with this process, they're always looking and reflecting on what can I teach better and how can I teach better. It's that simple. You know, improving student learning and helping teachers become better teachers, I can say is something that Carol and I are pretty passionate about. We get excited when students when we're seeing success with students, and we get pretty excited when our teachers are excited to get better, because that doesn't happen all the time. Hey, we have a great staff and we have great students at SCI, and we're proud of them, and we love working with them.
Thanks, Kev.
Yeah.
Question? Anyone? Good?
Thanks. The new trustee, I always ask everybody, what is your students here, grade 8 to 12 or 9 to 12, or what are they, and what is your enrollment?
We're
Familiar with that?
yeah, we're running 9 to 12. We have approximately 570 students right now. About 60 staff in the building. Gives us about 630 people in our building on any one day.
Okay. Jerry?
Thank you very much for the presentation. Very, very informative. I like what you've talked about specifically with regards to your SBDM dollars. As trustees, that's something that obviously our focus is on when it comes to budget and that sort of thing. I also liked how you guys were transparent about what you've done with those, and then how that impacts student outcomes. My question is, you talked about the SAND or that specific outcome. You mentioned it's difficult to do unless the teacher knows and understands the curriculum well. So I guess my question is, what kind of support do our teachers get to make sure that they do have that good understanding and knowledge of their curriculum? And are they getting that support?
We do have PD days that are scheduled throughout the year, and those are really important to us because we'll meet as a staff and we'll give them some time to try to hone that down and try to figure out exactly where that outcome is that students need to work on. So that's part of that support. We have learning support in our school that helps support teachers and helps with pedagogical aspects or the aspects of teaching.
Can you explain learning support, because I'm not sure that everybody understands what you mean.
Yeah, okay, good. Thanks, Paul. Learning support, how do I do this real quick? We received block funding for students with needs. A few years ago, if I can oversimplify this, that meant how many EAs we got in our building. Right now, it might mean that maybe it's not EAs that are hired all the time. Maybe we pool some of that money and hire professional staff, which would be teachers. So those teachers are now responsible to make sure those students who would have had EAs are getting the support they need, but we can also use those teachers to impact other classes or the rest of that class. The learning support teachers can work with small groups of students. Learning support teachers can work with individual students. Learning support teachers can work with 25 of the kids in the class while the regular teacher takes out the 5 that are really struggling. That's what learning support is.
We also, I had an interesting conversation today in that we're pairing up one of our teachers with another teacher in the division and paying for the subs through SBDM again. But there's lots of expertise in the division, and so when we reach out and pair people up, we can learn a ton from each other, and that was just an example. They're getting together at the end of February to work through some outcome-based assessment pieces.
If you go back to the slide, I think it's 6 slides back, it says after.
Oh, yep.
I don't really understand it. When you explain to me, maybe I'm a little slow, I'm getting old. But they're all on November 29th. So, but you got reproduction, and you got nature electricity, you got, it's all on
Yeah,
November 29th.
that's because we asked all the teachers before they left their workstations on November 29th to enter their what their mark books would look like for the next semester. So we just started the next semester. So now this is going to be an active mark book. So now the marks will go in when they enter the marks, then the dates will change.
So you're saying when I come and visit your school, I could ask one of
You
the,
don't even need to,
I could ask one of the
yeah, you need to come visit us and I'll load it up for you to see. Just to make sure they're all, but parents,
the active mark book, the one that's being used for 2, 3, 4 months, right?
it will be used from February, from now until the end of June. And so each teacher will have one of their 4 courses that they're teaching. Their mark book will look like this. So any parent in the division might have one of their child's courses that are set up like this, or they might have all of the courses set up like this, because they can check them online.
So, okay.
Yeah. That,
So that means if I ask one of the parents that I know, they can show me what they
100%. But give us a couple weeks.
Anyone else? Diane?
Thank you for the presentation. Question. I think that the board, as the new board members learn about the different schools, our schools do offer a fair bit of diversity in their programming at each school. And I think one of the things that's significant about SCI is their marine biology class. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because it's not offered anywhere else in the division.
I can give you a superficial answer, then I'll hand it over to Carol. Marine biology, it's, you know, it's kind of new to me. I'm new to the high school scene, but it's taught by Jane Payman, and she does a wonderful job of it. Very active learning, a lot of hands-on, real-life examples in that class. And a lot of dissection and interesting things go on in there, and they also do some pretty significant travel, and her next upcoming trip is going to be amazing and give those students like an incredible opportunity.
A lot of what Jane brings to the program at SCI is a different style of learning for the students, because it's almost, it's a privilege to be in that class, and students recognize that. I occasionally help her with some assessments, because rather than doing tests, she actually has interview questions for the students. So if they're, this is going to, I don't know, sea life, we'll say, then she would have 3 or 4 and state the animals, and the students would have to have a conversation about that animal. So really, she looks for a deep understanding in that course. So I think it's almost more about the process and less about the information.
And also, I know that I hear a lot about outcomes, and I've often heard that there's too many outcomes. So how do you decide which outcomes you're going to pick, and who decides that? And are the outcomes, like in the general subject areas, are they common across the whole division from high school to high school?
Yes. The Manitoba Education provides curriculum documents, and when I was talking about our English teachers going through and talking about their assessments and the outcomes in grade 9, so then they were building some vertical alignment so that they could start to build from the grade 9 knowledge on those outcomes, and then talk about what would be the next steps. What would those look like in grade 10? And then what would they look like in grade 11, so that you have that vertical piece. All schools in the province should be following the same outcomes as outlined by the province. Go ahead, Kath.
I was just going to say, so Kevin and Carol look after SCI, and then I need to make sure that I look after schools in the whole of Sunrise, and then other people look after the province. There's no picking and choosing about what you can and can't teach in the curriculum. You have to teach all the other. So you can't just do one that you want to. There are general learning and specific learning. So you have a little bit of choice in the specifics, but you have to teach everything.
Anyone else? Robin?
Thank you very much for the presentation. As a high school, I assume you get most of your students in junior high, I'll call it, as opposed to several different schools of students. I was hoping you would get them all from one. In which case, do you work closely with that one school, or you work closely with all the schools to ensure that students that are coming to you are your goals?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do get them from a few middle schools or elementary schools. And something that Carol and I have started since we got there is certainly dialogue between all the schools that feed us. And a goal of ours is to get our math teachers talking and our language arts teachers talking and some other teachers talking, so that our grade 9 teachers can talk to the grade 8 teachers in a positive way about what they're seeing the students need, what the students are coming in with that's awesome, but what they're missing. And having been at the middle school, I can tell you that the middle school teachers I worked with there want to know what the high school teachers think so they can better prepare the students. Does that answer your question? Yeah, so we're working pretty hard in the transition process between all of our feeder schools, we'll call them, and our school. And in fact, Carol and I have already set dates to go and visit each of our feeder schools. Feeder schools, so we have Springfield Middle School, we would have Enola, and we would have Dougald School.
My math must be off then. Enola is K to 8. Oh, my math is wrong.
Thanks, Robin. Anyone else? Kevin?
I have a question for you and Carol. One of the slides you talk about by the end of each semester, all students will have a 5% increase in one outcome. In layman's terms, does that mean then that all students are going to go up 5% in all their courses? Or what does that mean? So now you're talking to parents and you're talking to us around here. What does that mean? What does that mean to us that someone's going to go up 5% in one outcome?
Yeah, good question, Paul. You know, we don't intend that to be misleading at all, and we're very specific about it. But we had to start small with this because it's actually a big project. Because not only are we tackling a learning gap, but we're also tackling Maplewood, and we're also tackling outcomes about how to set it up properly. So we started really small. One outcome doesn't mean their mark is going to go up 5%. What we've seen is actually there's a bigger ripple effect that actually the mark does go up in other areas because there's spin-off. Like I said, like the math example, you understand one concept in math might help you understand a whole bunch of concepts better. So no, not all students' marks are going to go up 5% in all subject areas. Is that our long-term goal? Absolutely it is. Are we there yet? No, we had to start small.
Thanks, Kevin, Carol. Thanks for the presentation. We appreciate it. I'm going to ask you one more question. And now that you have the ears of the board, you have the ears of the board, and we're right in the thick of budget. So not everybody knows, as you heard some questions tonight, not everybody knows about Springfield Collegiate. Not everybody knows kind of all what you're about. So one of the things that we'd love, I've asked all the principals this, is what are some of the challenges that you're facing, and what are some of the things then that we can do for you to help you? Not saying we're going to do it all, Kevin. What we're asking you is, what are some of the things that, what are some of your challenges? Because we don't know, many people don't know your school.
Okay, thanks for that. You know, I have talked to some colleagues who have presented here, and they said this question was coming up because I asked them, what kind of questions does the board ask? And they said, well, you should be ready for this one. And Carol and I talked about it as late as this morning at about 11 o'clock about what we might respond to this. And we gave it some careful consideration. We have been for weeks. And you know what? We know there was a provincial announcement of a 15% reduction in core management, and we don't know what that means, and we don't even know the description of it. We're not sure we know if you know what it means, but that's quite something for the government to hand out. Having said that, and even in light of that, what Carol and I feel we need the most is probably an increase in admin time. There's two of us there. We're running 630 people in the building. We're passionate about our jobs. We really like working there, and we tell our staff that every staff meeting. But there's only two of us, and we can only be in so many places at one time. It doesn't matter how many hours we put in. There's only two of us. We can only be in so many places at one time, and there's lots of things going on. You know, I've worked in early years and middle years and now senior years, and I'm going to say bigger kids, bigger problems. So I think if there's anything our school needs, we're doing fine with staffing as long as it stays where it is. We are running some classes of 31 this semester. But that's not all classes. I don't want to mislead you. SPDM has been awesome. But probably that's the one area we could use some help in.
Thank you. Anyone else? Again, thank you for taking the time and coming out and presenting in front of us. The information that you shared with us is very valuable for us as we continue on learning and understanding. We have a great note that I wrote for you on my best stationery. But thanks very much for coming out and taking the time. Yeah?
You've been using Markbook for 6 years.
I want to say about 6 years.
And
I
parents?
think it was probably my first year in admin. So that's 6 years. Kathy, was it in when you were there?
The Markbook is part of our Maplewood program. So whenever we switch from the Markbook is part of software.
But you mentioned this, parents can access the marks on Markbook?
Yep.
And for how long have they been able to access that?
I can't answer for SCI because we've only been there a year now. But I do know that there's a link on our webpage that parents just click on. And even my son checks his marks once a week on his phone. So there's that transparency piece there, that availability.
Some light on that.
So one of the features of Maplewood is a parent portal. Say that charter school in Springfield are using the parent portal. Schools were not smaller, and we have a certain I want to say that it's 3 or 4 years that we've been using the parent portal. We started with
All right, guys, thanks very much. Good job. Appreciate it. We are going to push forward, certainly, with our meeting. So I need, we have minutes from the January 21st meeting. We resolve the board adopt the January 21st board minutes meeting. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by trustee Pachuski, seconded by trustee Barry. Any questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. It was passed 7-0. Thank you. We're going to move on to the superintendent's report. Kath, the floor is yours.
2 items in my report. So a couple of really quick highlights, and I didn't have it as part of my calendar. Last evening, Leanne and I were able to listen to Andy Hargrave from the University of Manitoba. The title of his lecture was Leading Change in Education. So it was pretty appropriate. One of the things that he made a point of talking about was the link between you can't achieve if you're not well, and you can't do well if you're not achieving. And being able to get between those two things was super hugely important. He talked about tons of data from the PISA results, what's going on around the world, and it was just super fantastic to listen to, and also a really good reminder that a lot of the things that we're tackling are right on track with where we're leading education. I did want to highlight that. That was something that Leanne and I were both The other piece that I wanted to highlight was at a former meeting, or I can't remember which one. In the bottom of my communication report, there's a link. You click on it in the report, will take you to the province where you can subscribe to any of the things that you would like to get sent to you. We talked about how do we get those, and you can pick the area of the government that you want to go to, and then these will just crop up in your email and tell you all you ever wanted to know about these areas. That was one of those things where we said, what are we getting? We've come up with a process for putting our correspondence in our meetings, but this is one of those places that you can just click off education, finance, or sport, culture, and heritage. Those emails or news releases come right through. So I just wanted to highlight that little part. And I think then I would quiet. See if you have any.
There's one question and one observation. When you go to this government link here that you asked, because I've done that, don't put down all, otherwise you get emails galore every day. So I would suggest that you try education, maybe health or something like that, but don't do all. I had to go back and change, but you get lots of emails. The other thing is, I just want to ask a question about this thing about live streaming. If I go back and watch the September board meeting, will that then change from 100 to 101 then?
So you'll notice there's a date on there. I think I put the date on this one. This is data as of January 13th. So we can do sort of checkpoint Charlies, or we can see what. So if we're looking at the live streaming data versus the downloading later or listening later, those would change.
Anyone else? Robin?
That government link you gave us to subscribe, that's not just us that can go. That is the tens of people that are watching our website right now can go and
By all means, feel free to mention that to all of our, doting public. They can certainly go on that website as well.
Anyone else? Okay, let's move on to the assistant superintendent, Carol.
So I also get a chance to she is attending the Manitoba Rural Learning Consortium. It's an organization that works with connecting rural school divisions and lets us maximize we have access to materials and we have access to research together. So she is currently with 16 other divisions working on our numeracy action research. That's we're doing at grade 6 and 9 and moving into grade 7 and 8. Seeing just some great gains in math in those areas. So she is representing the division off with the other school divisions and talking about that. That's why she is not here. Item. What she has included for you is she has given you her report. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer. The other thing that she's included is the grade 3 and 4 provincial assessments. I just want to really quickly talk about the grade 3 and 4 provincial assessments. We have 3 different types of provincial assessments that happen. Grades 3, 4 happen in the fall, somewhere near the end of October, beginning of November. We got the results, I want to say, a week and a half ago. So then we put them together when we bring them to the board at that point. They also go on our website under data and reporting. The next assessment that happens is happening right now in middle year. Right now, grade 7 and grade 8 teachers are assessing in against rubrics from the assessment. That assessment takes place right now, and then we get those results probably March or April. Our grade 12 students write provincial exams in ELA, in math, and in FAFSA, and we get those results at 2 points during the year. We'll get our January results, but more importantly, in the end of September, beginning of October, we'll get the combined results from our grade 12. Some of our schools don't offer the courses both semesters, so we really like to kind of wait and look at the whole picture. Those are the 3 provincial assessments that we get. In grade 3 and 4, and again, I'm not sure I have the talent to scroll and talk. In the grade 3 and 4, it is around literacy and numeracy. The English program assessments are all done at grade 3 level. Grade 4 is because our French immersion students are assessed in grade 4 after they've had another year of the language and they look at the French language. It's a grade 3-4 assessment. You can have a look at the categories through here. So the categories are, I think, a little further down the document. We've got multiple years of where are we sitting and also some trending information. How many students in the province, how many in Sunrise. And again, you'll see things like algebraic reasoning skills is one of them. Math. You'll see that number sense is another. There is a link on the provincial website as well if you wanted to look at what is this grade 3-4 assessment. See if you have any data or
On? You're not on, Don.
Really want to spend too much time, but I'd like some time to go over the results because I'm looking at number sense. And according to this, the division really hasn't improved. In fact, it's gone down a little bit in number sense. I don't want to go. My question is there any way that we can spend some time as a board to review this in detail? I don't want to do it on today.
You know what? That's a great thing, Don, because I think that remember what you're seeing here is you're seeing the results of grades 3 and 4 that they're talking about. So let's go to figure 3. Go to figure 3 on here, and it talks about students demonstrating comprehension. So what you're seeing is you're seeing a snapshot of students demonstrating comprehension for October and November. So we're seeing that in 2016, 61 and 58% of the students were meeting expectations. 2017 and 2018, 2019. Remember, that's in the beginning of the year. It's not at the end of the year. So there's where you're talking about meeting expectations. But I think that it's a really good thing, Dawn, for us to talk about because, yes, this is some of the data that we're looking for to find out where our students are. This is one thing. Our report card data could be some other things, but it's good to see. Kath?
I also need to point out that when you look at the 2016 data and the 2007, these are different kids. Those 2016 kids are in grade 6 now. 17s are in grade 5. The 18s are in grade 4, and the 2000, these are different kids that we're measuring. So part of the reason we're shifting to report cards is we can track student progress over time with cohorts of kids as they go through grades, as opposed to how did this group do, and then how did this group do.
I think that, again, the bigger question that we want to do some learning about is about how can data show what kind of student learning that we're having, student learning, and even heard tonight talk about, student growth, because we can measure student growth over a period of time if we're measuring the same students. So this is a good start for us. We do need to have some more questions, because we are going to continually going back to schools and asking, where are students doing with regard to learning. Anyone else? Art?
Yeah, thanks. Struck me interesting, Mr. Chairman, is the last comment here in the executive
So that's our observation, and that's what we use the data for, is to inform what we need to focus upon. So we wrote that.
I think that the question, Art, that we're looking for is they're telling us that that they're below the provincial average. Our question, I think, that going back to Kathy would be, what are you doing about it?
Yeah.
And what are you doing about it so that when we ask for that information at the end of June, and we haven't done that yet, but when we ask for that information at the end of June, how can we compare kids that were in October to kids now in June? Were they below the provincial average, and did they grow, etc.? But part of it is more question as schools are coming, what are you doing about it? Good point. Anyone else? Dan?
So where do you get that answer?
We haven't asked that question yet. So
I was surprised that I'd had to ask it, because I kind of thought, you're just telling me, so I'm assuming that somebody's already coming up with an answer.
yep.
So again, we just got this data like a week and a half ago, so then that puts it on our radar to look at and say, where do we need to look at and that. We also take this data, the provincial data, and we compare it to the report card marks. Because if there's a discrepancy between what a teacher's reporting on their report card and what's happening or what's coming through here, we want to look at a whole number of things. So we go through the provincial data, highlight where we need to spend a little more time and focus on, and we look at other sources. But again, we just got this back.
That's a great lead to a question that we can be asking, Diane, because we can see report card data that comes to us in November. We see report card data that comes to us in March. We see report card data that comes to us in June. Very easily, we can measure how many of our kids are meeting expectations, how many of our kids are growing. Because the question is, if 65% of our kids are meeting expectations, I hope the next time we do it that there's 75, and the next time that we're doing it, there's 85 or 95. And so what are they doing about it? So yeah, that's great. Go ahead, Diane.
I guess, I mean, it's important to have the report to the board, but the piece I find is even a suggested follow-up with deadlines and timelines. So we've got this. Can I expect that there might be a proposal coming forward in a month, in 2 months, like some timelines as to what, because we'll forget about it. Like this will be gone and we'll go on to something else. And so I think it's good, but I think especially that sentence at the end just kind of leaves me hanging, going, there's another sentence and a timeline.
So I feel pretty confident in saying that this never leaves Leanne and Jackie's radar. They're up to their elbows and eyeballs in data all day long, and anything they have on these reports, they are always looking at that. You'll hear it come through the school reports, like when SCI was here. We take this data and we go to schools and we visit, and I think Kevin said nudge. He was being kind. We take all that stuff and we go back to schools and we work with that on an ongoing and continual basis. In terms of reporting back to the board, I'd take that to Leanne and say, okay, here's what the board has said. She's not here today, so I have to do that tonight.
Dan, I'm going to go one step, sorry, Jared, I'm going to go one step further. The board can then say, schools, we want that information, and we want to know what you're doing about it. You heard Kevin talk a little bit about, hey, we're giving them lots of dollars and cents to go ahead and do things. We can be certainly turning around and saying, yeah, we're supporting your schools, but we want data to go ahead and show where growth is. And so we just need to, we need to set that ourselves. Jared?
I've seen on the Sunrise School Division website under plans and reporting under assessments, that report that we're seeing in front of us is there. So where would I find, because you mentioned that there's 3 assessments done every year, correct, on the same group of kids? So where would we find, or where would a member of the public or a ratepayer find the 2019, 2018, 2017, et cetera reports so they can see them?
Of the provincial or of provincial report card data?
No, so the report, I'm not sure. So the report that we have in front of us, the 2020 grade 3 and 4 provincial assessment report from the fall, we have those results. We posted them now to our website. Where would the public find the reports from 2019, 18, 17, and previous years so that they can view those reports and compare them from one year to the other? Because we have, you could actually follow those cohorts of kids on your own, or you can even look at 1 year, like I'll use 2020 as the example, is now we're starting to see the assessment report from the fall of 2019, and I'm not sure when the results would come from the June assessment. I'm assuming sometime in the fall of 2020, but then they can go and look and see where they can go and find the improvement and say, this is where the students were at in the fall of 2019. This is where they were at in June of 2020. I see our school divisions doing good work because those assessments are better. Or, hey, what is our school division doing and what is our board doing because those assessments aren't any better, or maybe even they're worse?
So twofold. We had a whole bunch of them up there and they got confusing because you'll see the report has a 4-year span in it. So the report that's currently up there has the 19, 18, 17, and 16. Those haven't changed. That's the same from year to year. The provincial assessments have the drawback of these grade 3 kids get assessed for provincial assessment purposes once. So part of our shift towards report card data is we do report cards in October and March and June, where we can start doing reporting on trending over time. We've just started that because we've shifted to Office 365 and are using a tool called Power BI that lets us do that. We haven't been doing that, and that's new this year. So we have one set of report card data that I think we shared in camera with you guys. This has 4 years of data on it. So we just put the most current because you can look at it all on that one page.
To answer your question, to come back to you though. Okay.
So I realize it has 4 years of data, but that's 4 years of data of fall data. So where's the 4 years of June data?
So for the provincial assessment, there isn't any. They only do the assessment in the fall. Yeah.
Can I come back to you? So this is assessment data from the province that we do send to the province. But remember, we collect report card data ourselves. So we can produce what you're asking for November, we can produce it for March, and we can produce it for June, and we can do that comparison. That's where I think that you're getting at. And this data, remember, the province wants it. It's good, it informs. It's still what our teachers are doing, but we can go ahead and look at the strands in ELA and the strands in math and go ahead and have that data. And then we can also follow those cohorts of kids. We can find out what they did in grade 3, what they did in grade 4, and what they did in grade 5 by producing that report card data. We just haven't asked the question yet. Don?
Well, first of all, Jared, I'm not quite sure whether your question was answered, so I'm going to answer it for you because I think you asked me, where can you find it? You go to the Government Manitoba website and go underneath the Continuous Improvement Plan, and you'll get that, and you'll get more than 4 years, right? You get some about 6 years. I think it starts with 2009. It's quite a bit lengthy thing. So the public can go there. They can go to the government website, get that. The only thing I am difficulty with is when we get it from the school, sometimes it's not in percentage, and it's hard to equate numbers, and province gives us percent. So I'd like to have the things consistent. That Since the province does all percentage, I prefer to have everything percentage.
I think that we need to ask the question, Don, and we need to ask about how we want the data and how we want the information and about how we go ahead and ask about how are our grade 3s doing this year, and that same group of grade 3s in grade 4 next year, how did they do? And we can get that data. It's coming. I think that we just need to ask ourselves and then be asking our schools. Go ahead. Anyone else on this? Sure. Go ahead. Okay.
Just that the board needs to do more than a 10-minute agenda item. We need to sit down and talk about this together.
So this data, this information that's come out to us is getting us all asking that question. And we're all asking the question is, how are our kids doing? And that's a great conversation for us to go ahead and have. Because now that we're asking the schools, all right, schools, how are we doing? Let's get it from them. Yep.
I'd like to make a motion that this board set up a specific time or a specific meeting to discuss data and data reporting and how we want to see those reports come forward and when we want to see them come forward and in what fashion.
And I'll second it.
There's a motion on the floor by Trustee Petrusky, seconded by Trustee Duma. And the motion is about setting up a time to look at assessment data. Any comments to that motion? So I guess the question is, we're asking for Kathy to come back to a suggestion, I guess Kathy and Paul, to sit down and come up with some kind of a time or a learning session to look at data. Is that what we're talking about, a learning session kind of to look at data? Awesome. Okay. So do you want to comment on the motion? Does anybody, Robin?
I'd suggest then that we wait till after the second reporting period, which also gets us past budget time, which gives us more time to look at it more closely. Then we'll have two sets of data.
Yeah, I think that hopefully Jared is asking what questions to ask and what data to collect. I think that that's what you're asking for as well. Great. No, I think that we're starting to talk a little bit about that, and you're music to my ears because that's exactly what I'm looking for as well. Any questions? Ben?
No, just a comment. I think that it's a start. It's not an end. Like this is the start of perhaps developing a cycle where we actually spend the time to look at these things. So I don't want to wait till June. I do want to get started on it.
Okay, so
I think what you said was, be it resolved that the board set a meeting time to specifically talk about which data to collect and how to report that data.
We're looking for marked data, not dollars data or stuff like that, or transportation. It's marks.
we're looking at report card data.
So it's your motion.
Good. I think that if we put in that we're looking for marked data, I think that when we come to that meeting, we can decide what we want at that meeting to whatever. I think that you've made a motion, which is a good one. The first time that we're talking about, let's find out what kind of academic data that we're asking from the schools. Diane?
My only concern was that the motion that I heard read out seemed a bit too prescriptive. And I think that what's not included is that is not just for us to get together to talk about what data we want, but actually just to talk about some of the information we've received. So having a discussion about the data we've received and potential other items that we want to be looking for. So more broader motion would, I think, meet what was discussed and I seconded.
Again, however we want to word it, Kathy was just trying to word it for us. Come up with something? All right. So we're going to hold that until Jared will come back to you, okay, as you think about it. Fair enough? Are we good about holding that until we get some? Okay, so let's move on. Thank you for that. Thanks, Kath. So that's the superintendent's report. So, just so that for information, nods around the head, we're accepting the superintendent's report. Nods around the head. Nods around the head. That doesn't make sense. Nods around the head. Head nodding around the table. Thank you. But you all yes said yes to it. So, Secretary Treasurer, Mr. Carlson.
My report is there as filed. The one thing I'll focus on for a second is Gord wanted me to highlight this, and this kind of came up last minute, so I hope you all saw the email yesterday. I changed the report. He's implemented a new firewall. I think we've probably all seen these spam emails that say, we need to change your password for your bank account. Click here, and they're collecting information. I think I've received some from the chair. I think both when it was Trustee Nicol and Trustee Magnon saying, I know you're in a meeting, but I need you to wire me that $1,000, and it comes from a completely different email address. So we do get all sorts of spam that comes through the building. The most negative consequence we've seen is that spammers will take over an email address from Sunrise and use our email addresses to spam out to other people, so we get blacklisted. And what happens then is nobody can receive emails from a Sunrise email address. So as a division, we're not losing dollars or sending money out to anybody, but it can create a whole bunch of issues if people are clicking on those spam links. So Gord did want me to highlight that. That should be greatly reduced.
Thanks. Questions? Keep going, Scott. All right.
Just a comment, because I did email Gord because I've received spam too, and I just wanted to know whether he wanted us to forward any of our spam to him so he could see what it was or what we should do. So he recommended delete it because he's getting enough of it coming his way. So just to delete anything you get.
Good heads up, Diane. Thank you.
I will touch on the second piece of my report, which is the letter from PSFB. They substantially changed the way in which they will be funding capital projects going forward. You can have a look. Essentially, they will fund up front 95% of any capital project we take on from PSFB. So in my head, that instantly means a couple of things. Historically, we've had the requirement to take out some debt. It's been a line of credit for the school division and fund those expenditures, and then periodically we do borrowing bylaws and recoup the dollars. It's not generally an issue. We have a line of credit, but certainly we incur interest costs when we run into that line of credit. So that need should be alleviated, and it should reduce our interest costs. I do have a bit of a concern in terms of potential cost overruns in the past if they are accepted overruns on a capital project via change orders with the contractors and things like that. It hasn't been too much of an issue making that part of the cost that we recoup from PSFB, so I do want to have a conversation and make sure that doesn't change, but this is just a heads up that hopefully going forward our need for a capital line of credit will be greatly reduced.
Questions for Scott? Ann?
Well, just a comment. I think that's quite a significant chunk of change because normally we had to upfront the whole cost, right? So now the government is saying they'll pay almost all of it upfront.
Yeah, we had to almost, well, not almost, we had, and it's requirement by the Public Schools Act, so we had a separate line of credit just for capital purchases, and it was $5 million, and at times we ran up against the limit. So, we were borrowing out up to $5 million and incurring interest costs, so that shouldn't occur anymore.
Thanks, Scott. So, hearing none, we can accept this report. Heads, we're good about it? Receiving it? Thank you. So we have board business 8.0. 8.1 talks about Parvy School D-Team trip late May 2020 to Drumheller. Be resolved the board approve in principle the Parview D-Team trip May 2020. Drumheller, Alberta, subject to superintendent's final approval. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Trustee Pachuski, seconded by Trustee Nicol. Any questions? We'll vote, please. Thank you for passing this 7-0, because I don't think that I'd be going home if it wasn't getting passed, so thanks for going ahead and doing that. 8.2, Springfield Middle School Grade 7 Cohort Band, April 21st, 22nd to Brandon. Be resolved the board approve in principle the Springfield Middle School Grade 7 Concert Band trip, 21st, 22nd. Subject's final approval. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Diane, seconded by Karen. Questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Seven, nothing, thank you. So 8.3, we deferred that to go into in-camera. We have committee reports. There was nothing from the policy committee. The finance committee meeting minutes are here. Garrett, you want to talk a little bit about that, or information from the finance committee, the minutes? Anything there that you want to talk about?
You know what, to be honest with you, I'm not even looking at the minutes, but there is some items to, that are going to be brought back to the board for discussion in the near future, so we're going to have to set some time aside to have those discussions as well, because there are a number of items that we need to be discussing. I don't know if you want to be specific with that, Scott, or add anything to that?
We've touched on this a little bit in the past. We're working on some school funds reports with the individual schools right now to have an understanding what they have sitting there and what their plan is. There's also a couple of things that we haven't got formal ratification, but have been mentioned a couple of times at the Finance Committee, specifically down the road, the use of purchase cards. That's kind of just been pushed aside because of budget season, to be honest with you. And the other thing we have touched on, and hopefully we'll have a formal recommendation, is banking. We've had some proposals from various different banking institutions, so different costs associated with that and different pros and cons. So we'll get a formal recommendation from the Finance Committee at the next Finance Committee meeting.
So recommendations from the finance committee eventually come to the board to go ahead and make decisions on those recommendations. Is that right, Trustee Pachuski?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So can we say that we accept or we received the Finance Committee meeting minutes for information? Good on that? Thank you. We do have an action item, the Finance Committee check register. So be resolved, the board received the December 2019 check register with total amount of checks issued at $3,039,367.70, reviewed January 28th by the Finance Committee. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Trustee Harris, seconded by Trustee Pachuski. Any questions on that? Hearing none, we'll vote. Seven, nothing. Thank you. Thank you, Finance Committee. Professional development, this is for information, the MSB convention. On March 12th and 13th, you've got the information that's there. I think, Stacy, you're looking for, has everyone, can we go around the room? Stacy, have you heard from everybody, or you haven't heard from some, or do we need to talk about this from anybody right here? It's about information. There is a couple of things that are time sensitive. One is about our ballots, but we said that we would talk about it next time. Is there anything else that we need for that convention? Scott?
My biggest concern is if you are planning on going and haven't advised, Stacy, there is a deadline around which we have to drop the rooms, the block of rooms that we've reserved. So, you know, do you recall what that deadline is, Stacy? We got an email on it today, I believe.
February 10th.
February 10th. So that's coming up within a week. So if you are planning on going but haven't had the opportunity to tell Stacy to reserve your room, please don't come on the 15th and say you want a room at the Delta, because it's not likely going to happen.
Are we okay about going around table to know if you know or not? Want to try that? Robin, do you know if you're okay? Jared, you're not sure? You can attend? Dawn, you're going? Art? Aaron, do you know yet? Good. Diane, you going? On? Russell going? Okay. I don't know. So I need to get back to you. I know. Okay, I'm the one. Yeah, I know. Okay, stop, all of you. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Oh, sorry. Okay, well, let me just make sure where I am. So that's professional development 9.1. The floor is yours about that motion. Oh. let's go back to the motion.
This is my first attempt.
Okay.
I got it in an email ready to send to Stacy if you guys are okay with it. It says, be it resolved, the board requests to receive report card data from the superintendent for school years beginning, I just randomly selected with 2017-2018, to begin the process of analyzing and discussing, or analyzing and a discussion as to the regular and consistent reporting process to the board and public.
Okay with that? It's being open, it's talking about getting data and then discussing. It doesn't mean that we're tied to anything. You go away with that? Yeah?
So I just want to make sure you're looking for us to go get report card data from 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20. I'll go see if we can.
Yeah, and if you can't, I mean, I just made up those years, Kathy.
Questions
I
on
will,
the,
yeah.
on the motion? Okay, we'll have to vote by hand. All in favor? Well, there's nobody opposed, so it's carried. It's 7-0. Thank you. Okay, so let's go to the financial monitoring report. Oh, there's no professional development reports. So 10.0 financial monitoring report. Be it resolved that the board adopt the financial monitoring report for the months ended December 2019, reviewed by the Finance Committee on January 28th. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Dawn, seconded by Karen. Thank you. Any questions on the monitoring report? Hearing none, we'll vote. Okay.
So in number 7, where it says that there's approval, has the chair had to approve anything? Or number 7, have you done any approvals?
I don't believe we've had anything recently that has not gone to RFP, and RFPs come to the greater board, obviously, but we haven't had a single purchase of greater than 50,000.
Okay. The thinking I had to do there. Okay, we're going to go ahead. Is that good enough time? Okay, we'll vote. Thanks, Stacy, for holding that. Seven, nothing. Thank you. There's board correspondence, 11.1. There's a bunch of board correspondence. I'm not going to go through them. Nice to know information. There's some great nice to know information that's there. Thanks, Stacy, for finding that information for us. We've got some upcoming meetings, 12.5A, that are listed there. Thank you. Questions from the public? Oh, anything? Okay. We are going to move into in-camera. Is there anything that's coming out of in-camera that for these guys? There may be one thing comes out of there. Just to give you a heads up, there may be one thing, but it's, yep. I don't know if I should have said that, but okay. Yep. It's SEO is on there. That's the only one thing. I just don't want you to, if you want to stay, great, but so we're going to go into in-camera. So can we take 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and then we'll go into in-camera? Thanks, guys, for coming.
Be it resolved, the board direct the chair to collect information with regards to the vacancy of our senior elections officer or official.
So that's motion by trustee Pachuski and seconded by trustee Berry. Any questions to that motion? Hearing none, we have to vote by hand. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. So that was 7-0. Thanks very much. I do believe that there's nothing else coming from in camera, right? So, motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn. Motion by trustee Pachuski. Thank you very much. Have a good one.